Mike has stated and established on multiple occasions in public hearings that the use of a property within a C2 zoning district within Gardner solely for the use of, well, that's phrased badly, for the use of used car sales, not with the attendant use of or sale of new cars, is prohibited under the zoning ordinances. And my memorandum talks about that analysis on the second page as to how that conclusion is reached. Specifically, the retail sales of used cars are allowed in C3. The C2 district then goes on to explain that those uses allowed for in the C3 district are not permitted in C2. So absent some language within the C2 district expressly allowing for the sale of used cars, it would be, or it is excluded from the district. The only mention of the sale of used cars within the C2 zoning classification is under conditional use permits, where it talks about the fact that, we'll summarize it here. It states that retail or wholesale of new passenger cars, and again, this is under the conditional use permit section. It states used cars and new or used recreational vehicles may be sold as an accessory use to the selling of new cars and only on the same lot as the new cars or on a lot separated only by the right of way. So that conditional use allows for the sale of used cars only when it has the attendant use of new car sales. It's my understanding that Gardner Auto Sales does not have an attendant use of used cars. So starting with the premise that the sale of used cars is prohibited within C2, then we get to the question of whether a special use permit application is, one, permitted under Kansas law when the underlying zoning district prohibits the use, and two, whether the Gardner zoning ordinance permits a special use permit to permit a use which is otherwise prohibited in the underlying zoning district. It's my opinion that the answer to both of those questions, as outlined in my memo, is that no, that is not a permissible use under either Kansas law or under the Gardner zoning ordinance. First, under Kansas law, whether a application for a use of land is phrased as a zoning variance or as a special use permit is immaterial. It's the nature of the request that you look to, and the nature of this request is a request for a use of a piece of property which is prohibited by the underlying zoning district. As defined under Kansas law, that is a request for a use variance. Use variances under Kansas law are illegal. They are not permitted. The only types of variances that are permitted under Kansas law are area variances. And by area variances, that's defined again in my memorandum. We're talking about things like setback lines, height restrictions, things like that. Not, we prohibit used car sale lots in C2, and we're going to allow a variance for sale of used cars in C2. So that use variances under Kansas law are illegal. So under Kansas law, it's my opinion that the special use permit application of Gardner Auto Sales would not be permitted. Then I think if you also look to the language of the zoning ordinance, it prohibits or it doesn't allow for a special use permit for a use that is otherwise prohibited by the zoning district. And I cite to the two provisions within the special use permit code section at 18.145.020, and specifically the prefatory language there, which makes it clear that the use must the The use for which the special use permit is sought must conform to the general intent and purpose of this title and of the regulations of the zoning district in which it may be located. So, the prefatory language to the special use permit code section makes clear that for a special use permit to be issued, that you must first comply with the underlying requirements of the zoning district in which the property is situated, and then if it's an enumerated special use, such as an adult use or things like that, then you also have to get a special use permit, because usually the uses itemized in your special use permit codes are deemed to be of such a I don't want to say noxious, but have a potentially detrimental effect upon the surrounding properties, that in addition to complying with the underlying zoning code or the zoning district regulations, you also have to get a special use permit so that the governing body can keep you on a short leash, meaning a specific time frame where they can set conditions on that specific use, and if those conditions are not met, then they will have to come back to the governing body to deal with any issues that might need to be addressed. So that's the legal opinion that I arrived at and provided to Mike last week.
So, Mr. Dank, if I'm reading this correctly, and thank you for your explanation of the memo, the only way that we could, that there could be a remedy in this regard would be to modify the C2 zoning ordinance or the zoning description to allow for the use of used cars as a single use on that, in that, you know, set aside from new cars.
Right, that would be a permitted solution for Gardner Auto Sales, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, changing the law to benefit one company,
well,
one person.
I will remind you, Larry, that the whole reason why used cars are excluded in the first place as a single use within the ordinance is to keep a used car dealership from setting up shop in Gardner. So it was changed that way specifically to prohibit a enterprise from opening their doors in this town. So that happens all the time.
What are you citing as your, what kind of timeline?
Not really. There's not a lot of C3 property in Gardner city limits.
Say that again?
There's not a lot of C3 property in Gardner city limits. I've checked the zoning map.
So your statement about that it was changed, where do you find that?
Mike, you had stated that there was a circumstance, and it was before you came here, obviously, but that in the history of this whole thing, there was a I don't think it was you. I think it was actually one of the old city council members from way back in the day.
Oh,
who mentioned that was done specifically to not allow an individual who was running a used car lot to remain in operation in this town.
So you have just hearsay, no facts.
Well, I mean, you don't have any facts in that we would be making this change. I think it's remedying an ordinance or remedying a zoning restriction that I think doesn't make a lot of sense. Why allow used cars next to new car sales but not allow used cars by themselves?
You know,
I mean, this is not time for debate because we're not debating any action item.
Sure.
But
And I will say, you know, I looked at this stuff a while ago, and this isn't arguing for or against anybody's position. Those zoning ordinances were adopted in 1990.
yes.
Council have anything for staff?
Well, yeah, because I guess so the special use permit, which was supposed to be discussed at the planning commission tomorrow night, is not going to be discussed. So where does this leave us with this, I guess? What direction? What are our options, I guess, is what I'm asking for.
Well, I think that just what this
I think we're
says is
just
that the application is void. The application is voided and the money's refunded to the applicant.
So he's selling cars out there because we didn't rezone the property, and